Right then. Well, thank you everyone for joining. We've got a very intimate group tonight. So thank you for everyone who's taken the time to be here today. For those who don't know me, I'm Maya and I am a manager for communications at Wasm based in Malaysia. And I'm your host for today. And I'm lucky enough to introduce Rohana Da Silva, who is a digital marketing and audience intelligence consultant who'll be spending about the next 45 minutes or so taking us through fundamentals of social media ads in scouting. Now, you may have seen from the post that we put up on Facebook and Treehouse that Rohana's agency works with companies like Netflix and Puma and Allianz Bank, and she's also working with scouting on the new strategy for scouting. So she's very well placed to talk us through this topic tonight. And so I will just, in the absence of Lynn and Angel, because I think they're both on leave today, I will just hand the floor straight over to Rohana.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Maya, and thank you everyone for joining tonight. I hope this session will bring some valuable insights that you can use. We're also hoping that we can expand these sessions down the line so that it can provide you other insights in the large world of digital marketing as a whole and how you could use it in the Scouts world. Let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Give me 1 second. Sorry, Maya, I don't think I have the option to share my screen. Would it be possible to grant it to me?
Oh, it should be
there
okay.
It is. There it is. Got it. Thanks. Fantastic. Can everyone see my screen? Just a thumbs up. Awesome. Perfect. So we'll be taking you through today the leveraging social media ads in scouting, just the fundamentals. This is a very broad topic, and we can certainly dive into the executional details to help you further. But of course, this can take some time. So we thought we'd keep this light and more so the basics that I feel would be very useful in your planning. Before we go into that, I'm just going to send a link here. It's a poll for this workshop. And again, this is for us to gauge a little bit of your understanding about this topic and whether there are specific challenges that you're facing that in the future we could help craft a workshop for. You can fill it in now, or you can fill it in after the session. Not a problem, and we can discuss those down the line. Okay. Moving on, so this is me, I'm Rohana, you can call me Ru for short. I have been in the digital marketing space for the vast part of the last 10 years. I've worked predominantly with commercial brands such as Abbott Pharmaceuticals, Spotify, and Netflix, and Estee Lauder companies. But my role is really to help brands like nonprofit brands to understand their audience online and understand how they could leverage social media and advertising as a powerful tool to connect with these audiences. I'm also really passionate about human rights. I'm passionate about the Scouts movement and what you guys are all a part of. So really thank you for all of the great work that you do. I'm truly inspired by all of your efforts. So diving into the first session of today's session, when are social media ads and boosting useful? This is just going to be the basics. I guess I can draw your attention to the main statement here. Organic social media limits your audience reach. Now, if you're just posting on your profile and you have no advertising budget behind it, you're really only going to be reaching the people that follow you. Now, if you have a really large base, that's great, but you really should be looking at what are the other ways that you can optimize this reach to really get to the core of the audiences who are interested in what your brand has to offer, but perhaps aren't aware of you. So this is something that I think we need to take into consideration when we consider organic posting and paid posting, which I'll take you through in depth in just a bit. So before I go into that, I'd like to draw your attention to some stats that I think would be useful for you to understand why this space is so powerful for nonprofits. Social media and constant communication won't work for every age group. And of course, with the movement, we're trying to target a majority of people who care about issues and causes that are close to us. If you look at this chart here, you can see that boomers and Gen Zers actually prefer quarterly and yearly communication to monthly or weekly. There's something to take into consideration when we're doing ads or when we're doing organic postings. You may not get the traction that you're looking for from every audience, but it's important to know what works for each audience type, especially as we consider volunteers of every age group, we consider the youth, we consider parents, and then of course, other NSOs as well. Some other stats that I thought would be useful for you to take a look at: the ability not to ignore new up-and-coming platforms. Now, of course, I'm sure everybody here has had their own experience with TikTok, which directly has contributed to over 7 million donations to nonprofits by people using the app. So this is definitely a space to watch. I know there's a lot of efforts already going behind this. And when you consider the type of advertising that you can do on the platform, this is also something that we can leverage. 55% of people today donate online using a credit card or debit card. So it's really critical that digital marketing is in place with whatever we try to do to connect with our audiences online. And making sure that we have multiple ways to donate when you consider the types of payment methods that there are. On average, one-time donation is nearly 1.5 more when nonprofits offer other types of payments gateways. So for example, PayPal and other digital wallet payments. We see internet penetration increasing at a very massive rate, and this is something that we need to take into account when we're using advertising. The number one reason Gen X choose not to donate to an organization is an outdated website. So it's important that every communication channel that we use is updated, it is using the latest features, it is also considering the fact that that user experience is the gateway into ensuring that they do return an action. So this is something that I want us to keep in mind for our advertising placements as well. Partnerships, social media challenges, and user-generated content still to this day remain as some of the most effective ways to gain funds. Something to keep in mind when we're looking at fundraising efforts as well. Now, if I can draw your attention towards the main topic of the session, which is ads and boosting, and what are those differences? So ads, what you can see here, and I'll enlarge this for your own purpose, typically happen through the ads manager on Facebook. And it has another layer of way more advanced customization solutions. It often is not on your feed. So it's something that you create. Let's say it's a specific asset and you want a specific call to action. Perhaps you want to draw out a learn more feature, or perhaps you want to have a donation, or maybe you want to drive someone to your website and you want to specifically target a group of people. It will not appear on your feed. It will be disseminated through the ad platform so that it can reach the audience that you selected. Whereas boosting is actually created, it's not created in ads manager, but you don't have the same level of customization features that you would in an ad. It's predominantly used for awareness or engagement posts. It helps you to get a higher engagement rate, but of course it is predominantly used for those reasons, not necessarily like ads when you look at being able to target multiple different types of personas and audiences online. What they're useful for is something that I think is very important to know. As I mentioned, if you're only using an organic post, you're only reaching the audience that already follows you. So Facebook right now is already approaching 3 billion users, and they're with ads positioned the correct way. We have the capacity to reach over 72% of these monthly active users, which is huge. And of course, if I can remind you that Facebook also owns Instagram, so this is considering that platform as well. When we look at ads, you'll be looking to potentially connect with your target audience. If you have a specific target audience, you can do niche or broad targeting, higher conversion rates. So if, for example, a conversion rate is someone filling up a form and giving them their details, this is the best place to use ads for. It also allows for you to have in-depth analytics, so to see how someone has engaged with your ad, how can you use that information to potentially retarget them in the future and take them through a journey with your brand. But of course, it's also good for consolidated business pages. So if you consider, if you have one page for multi-market, you can do all of your ads from one page and you can target to specific countries, let's say Brazil, US, perhaps somewhere in Europe. You can do all of that broad targeting as well through the ads in one single page. Whereas boosting, you're looking more to attract new followers, if that's a goal that you have. Perhaps you want to improve your engagement and you want to have more people interact with that one specific post. It will be on your feed so people can see that engagement. It helps you promote the brand. And then, of course, what content works best for you and your goals and audience. It's a little bit more diversified in that sense, but it really is a testing playground when you look at boosting. I've also taken the liberty to put together a chart that considers when you would use social boosting and when you would use ads. I won't go into detail, but I will be sharing with you some resources after the session, which will essentially help you plan your ads in the future, and you know exactly what kind of placements you would have access to, objectives that you can set, which ultimately are your call to action, and then of course targeting, which I'll dive deep into the next session that we'll go into now. So how to target and work with small budgets. Of course, we know that in the nonprofit space, we are limited to what we can spend. We want to be very frugal about how do we spend those ad budgets? How do we ensure that there's a call to action to everything that we do? How do we ensure that we maximize that budget so we can get to the bottom of the objective that we had, whether it's single one-off donations, reoccurring donations, perhaps attention to a specific cause. These are all the kind of areas that we can consider. And of course, it requires a lot of meticulous and careful planning when you consider small budgets. Why? Because you don't have that much room to play with, right? You want to make sure that you know your objective, you know exactly who you're speaking to, what kind of format are you using, the frequency in which someone will receive your ad, and of course, what channel you potentially are maybe looking at. So I'm going to cover some of that here. But the number one thing that I think we should consider, and it's something that we speak to brands from all over the world, and no matter what, is really to start with your core audience. This is really going to set you up as the foundation of which you'll build the rest of your ad strategies. Platforms like Facebook and Google are constantly learning from your efforts, right? They're able to only advise you based on the historical efforts that you have on your own channel. So understanding who you want to target, for example, the demographics, location, psychographics, user behavior, all of these things are very crucial in ensuring that you have the right messaging, but you also have the right call to action and also the right ad that will resonate with that individual. So this is where we basically start. Now, when you look at targeting as a whole, you would consider location, demographics, interests of that audience, behavior, and connections. In addition, if you're looking to target in a country, you can also choose to target cities versus smaller towns. You can also geofence a specific location. Perhaps there is an event like Jota Joti and you want to geolocate all of your ads just to that specific event location. You also have the ability to do that, which is extremely powerful when we consider how do we really optimize smaller budgets to get us the optimal results that we're looking for. Now, I would draw your attention to two ways of targeting. There are traditional ways and there are more modern, more plausible ways to do targeting when you consider how social media platforms are evolving. I also have to say, which I will take you through a little bit further in the presentation, is that I'm by no means tied to Google or Facebook. Of course, not only do I want to draw your attention towards the ways in which you can use the platforms, but I also want to shine some light on the disadvantages and the areas that we should be cautious of, because I think this is something that we need to understand. I think, while these tools are very useful, we also have to think very, very hard about what is the ultimate objective that we have and how do we want to utilize that for the best benefit of the dollars that we're spending there. So traditional targeting looks at age range. So let's say 25 to 35. It looks at ethnicity. It looks at language. It looks at location and household income. Very traditional methods that don't often paint the picture of what is your user or what are the people that you're trying to target online care about. Ultimately, that's something that we're definitely moving away from. All of the clients that we typically work with, we tell them not to focus so much on these areas. We look at more the modern targeting considerations, which is what's the current data that you have? How have you segmented that for real world attributes? The demographics, of course, we consider social economics, psychographic. What is the personality of that specific audience pool? What is the brand affinity and channel relevancy? Are you promoting your ads in a channel that is relevant to that audience if that audience is within a specific age group? We also look at online habits. Do you prefer desktop over mobile? Do you typically search on Google versus another platform? And so on. And then, of course, interests and preferences. What do you truly care about as a user, and how can I create an ad with the right communication and creative that will resonate with you. But what's more important, and I think something that is often not talked about in the marketing space, is the importance to have inclusivity and to avoid bias, right? While you may be looking to target someone with the right messaging because you think that this is the personality type, it's really, really important not to take only one point of view into consideration, but also look at the data, look at the segmentation that you have behind that. Now I'll draw your attention to some creative targeting, which I hope is going to expand a little bit of how you think the next ad that you may want to run for your initiative. So you can look at weather-based targeting, which allows you to specifically create an ad that is tailored to the weather, for example. So perhaps there's an initiative around, a flood, or maybe there's a drive to raise money for a specific flood. You could potentially create an ad that only targets a specific area and also has that kind of initiative behind it. You could also look at target based on life event. Here's an example on where an ad was used to basically use someone's birthday as a way to donate funds to a nonprofit, which we think is really important as well. You could also use it from an anniversary context or wedding as well. Perhaps you want to draw out some types of gifts and so on. We also look at related interests. So if you have ever scrolled through your Google search feed and you've realized that you're getting a lot of articles that seem to be very similar to the things that you're browsing or searching or have an interest on, that is related interest targeting. You could do that on an ad level, and it's pretty precise. And then, of course, behavior, which I mentioned earlier. Perhaps you prefer a certain hour of the day, or you prefer mobile versus desktop. These things take into consideration when we're looking at behavior. Other types of creative targeting are connections. You can target connections of users who have engaged with your ads. So if someone, let's say, clicked the Learn More button this week, and you want to retarget them because they've already did that action, you could do so with another ad that says, hey, I noticed that you were interested in this content. Can I share more information with you? Or would you like to donate to this cause, for example? So that's something that you could look at. Dynamic is when your ad is automatically placed in every device, sized according to how the user will see it, which is very helpful if you have a not so much support from a creative standpoint. Perhaps you don't have the creative manpower and you want to create only one visual. This allows you to have that opportunity to do so. Custom audience is perhaps you have already a list of people who have already engaged with you in the past. You have their information. Perhaps they've signed up for an event and you have their email. We can actually upload all of this into Meta and you're able to target them directly, which is also very useful. And last but not least, sequential, which is basically taking the user through a journey of, what do you stand for? What are you looking to have? Perhaps there's an event and you want to build up some hype around the event, then you can also use sequential targeting for that. Moving on to ad dollars. And this considers both the business vertical, so in this case, it being a nonprofit, the budget type, buying type, bid strategy, optimization, currency, and schedule. All of this is so much to take into context, and I know we're not going to be able to cover it all during this session, but certainly if you have any further questions or in depth that you want us to take, we can definitely plan another session for that. On average, for nonprofits, there is a baseline of 5 to 15% of the budget to be utilized for marketing. Now, that's taking into account your entire marketing, which is not a lot in comparison to other, commercial brands who are using this space. So this is really where nonprofits could use the support, whether it's through partnerships where perhaps someone could fund the ad dollars, whether it's through grants. I think this is very crucial because if we're not going to be able to spend a specific amount of money on certain ads, we might not be able to get the results, and therefore it might be a loss for the effort that we're trying. So this is something to consider when we're looking to not spread ourselves too thin in a way. So how would we achieve more with less? As I just mentioned, trying not to spread ourselves too thin. Yes, there's a myriad of channels online, a myriad of formats that we can use, but being able to say, let me go to the most high intent channel possibly. Where are people really looking to make an impact, and speak to those people with an ad? Because then, of course, we will be optimizing for that audience as opposed to an audience that perhaps does not have an interest in what we're trying to say. But of course, it takes testing ad formats to understand this. So that's one area that you can help achieve more with less. Second, automate. Meta actually has a new initiative called Meta Advantage, and it basically allows you to automate your audience, your budget bidding strategy, the destination, and also the placements. So it's basically taking one asset and taking one budget and spreading it across multiple ways in which they think the specific audience that you chose will resonate most with it. That's also very useful. I'll include in the resources an area that you can take a look at this. And then, of course, again, A/B test, right? Having the ability to create two ads that essentially say the same thing, but have some variation so that you can test what worked better one time versus the next. And of course, last but not least, stop, start. It's important that we understand that the way social media ads works, particularly Meta, is if you run an ad for a few days and you stop it suddenly, it will start to relearn the process once you start again. So you're kind of starting from zero again. So it's important to let it run its course. The more insights one ad gets, the more historical information the machine learning side of Meta will have to help you optimize in the future and even suggest. We're seeing a big movement with AI in these platforms where it's helping suggest whether your budget is optimal, whether the placement makes sense, whether your targeting segment is the right one. So the longer duration you have an ad running, the better equipped you will be with insights. Now, I understand there will be some limitations budget-wise if perhaps we don't have enough budget to run a campaign, but certainly if we have a limited budget that we can run potentially for a 2-week period just to get some top-line learnings, you will be better equipped the next time you want to run your next ad. I've also put in here some tips which you can look at during your free time. So some takeaways from those sessions. One, define clear ad goals, right? What objective are you trying to have? Is it a learn more? What call to action do you want to do? You want to drive website traffic? Do you want someone to sign up for an event? Would you like a one-time donation, a reoccurring donation? Or perhaps you just want to build awareness for, a specific subject that you think the audience is not aware of at the moment. That's the most important part. Second, which I actually would say is pretty much in line with first, is prioritize your target audience. Know who you want to market to. This is going to be crucial in ensuring that the budgets you have also will be aligned with that and that you maximize that potential. Third, Google in itself is such a broad platform and it requires a lot of information. So I've put it in here because I think it's critical for us to understand, but I think it's something that we can also dive into in another session. But keyword research is very, very important. Google itself, when you consider search ads, is the highest intent-based marketing, which means someone already has the intent to donate, the intent to draw impact, the intent to sign up for a nonprofit event, for example. And how well you decide those keywords and how you implement them for your search ads will really give you the type of results that you're after. So I think this is something that is also critical when you consider Google. 4, craft compelling copy and test. It's always a testing environment. These platforms are constantly changing. It's important to keep that in mind, that one thing may be said today and 3 weeks from now, it may be another. That's just the reality of social media. But if you're testing in that environment, you'll have a lot more to play with in the future. But with that, what is important is if you're doing an ad, for example, to send traffic to a specific landing page, and that landing page is for, let's say, to acquire information or to get someone to register. Make sure that the content that you have on your ad and the content that you have on your landing page resonate with one another. Meta specifically will underscore your ad if they're not relatable. It will say that it's not relevant for your objective. So this is something to keep in mind of in the future when you're looking to specifically to do either lead acquisition or even to draw out a conversion as well. Fifth, leverage remarketing. Again, we collect so much data when we consider the people that we're constantly speaking to online, the channels that we have open. Perhaps there's already a list of people that you've engaged with in the past in which they've given you their information, their email or their name. That is a perfect way to start a very targeted and niche campaign, particularly if someone that's already donated in the past and you want to draw that back out. So this is an area to really keep in mind. And one that should always be at the top of these kind of sessions that I do, but I thought I'd push it to the bottom to kind of keep your attention on the ads, is AI is here to stay, and really use it to your benefit when you consider, is my copy correct, or am I using the right grammar? Can I really structure these keywords correctly? There are tons of tools online around AI and how you can help you with your ads. That I think definitely a good place to start and leverage. Okay, so now I'm going to go into the importance of monitoring and learning from ad performance. And I want to do this the reverse. Typically, we look at what are all the key things that you would do to ensure that you have the right performance. However, what's good to know is what you should also avoid, because then you won't run into the same pitfalls that other brands potentially may have in neglecting these areas. So of course, tracking and measurement are always going to be crucial in understanding your performance. It's not enough to just run an ad, set it and leave it and not come back to it. It's always good, as I mentioned, at least if you're running it for 2 weeks and you get some insights, and then we optimize based on that, whether you're going to shift the targeting, whether you're going to shift the bidding strategy, whether you're going to shift the type of format you use, that's all important. But the things to avoid, I think, are as critical as they are the things to actually consider when you're measuring. One of the biggest pitfalls that we see brands do is benchmarking others. Now, what I mean by this is saying, this page did an ad and they did so much better than me. Why am I not performing? We don't have enough insight on the competitive lens to know how much budget did they use, what format did they use. You will only have the public view of that. So benchmarking yourselves against a competitor or another peer in the space is not the right way. Always, always, always benchmark yourself. If you did 5 ads, what were the learnings from those 5 ads and how can you apply it for your 6th ad? As opposed to looking at peers and saying, why am I not getting the same type of engagement? Ultimately, you can only benchmark your own historical performance. And that's something that we always keep in top of mind for brands. Now, number 2, measuring an awareness method for conversion. If you're running an ad purely for awareness because you want to ensure that the users know about your initiative, or they know about your website, or they know about your next event, or they know that you're fundraising, that's an awareness ad, right? There's still steps that a user will need to take before they consider your brand, before they take an action. So you can't measure an awareness ad the same way you would for a conversion ad, which would mean them instantly making that donation or instantly giving you their information, whatever you deem as a conversion at that point. So this is something to keep in mind of. Number 3, a drip approach. Now, a drip approach is what we reference as we do one ad today, maybe 3 months from now, we try another one, maybe 4 months from now, we say, okay, maybe we'll try another ad. That's a drip effect. And that also hinders the platform from learning your historical data and learning how well you've performed or how well you haven't. So while we may not have the luxury or the ability with budgets wise to be an always on space, we can still have consistent, let's say, boosting or consistent ads that you can look at and measure those before you do the next one. And last but not least, mass targeting. Even mass targeting, if you say, I want to target everyone in, let's say, South America, even mass targeting requires audience segmentation, and it requires for you to go in and really place in the interests, the psychographics, the platforms, the placements that will cater to that audience. So never really take a mass targeting approach. So while there is substantial evidence, as what I've mentioned, on the upsides of paid advertising, I think it's also important to consider the downside. all of these tools are fantastic, and technology is great in pushing us forward to really, be able to, for example, in the past where on ground, you would be able to reach 500 people, you can scale that by 10x or more. But there are some layers that we should look at as well that, are very important in this case. So disadvantages of social media advertising, it's definitely not as easy as it looks. Of course, I think specifically Meta and Google are trying to make ways in where the user-friendly journey for yourselves, if you are a marketer, to do your ads, they're really trying, but the terminology and the level of which you'll find yourself going into a rabbit hole of placements and buttons and different things that you can consider. So it's not as easy as it looks. Seek to understand more, seek to read more whenever you can. Of course, utilize resources like this one so that you can understand more of the environment. But one crucial place to start is the setup, right? The setup of your ad, the setup to ensure that the links that you're using make sense. All of this is really, really key, and that's a really good place to start. 2, it's competitive. Of course, it's accessible to all. You don't have to be a marketing professional to run an ad. You can run it at your own leisure time. You can try it any day. So as long as you have some ad dollars to do so. But because it is competitive and because it's accessible to all, that means that the competition will be higher, and you might have people spending more who will ultimately be placed in front of the line to get more views or more traffic or more conversions and so on. So there is a high cost there as well to consider. It is, after all, a pay-to-play environment. And 3, it's very fragmented, right? I mean, I think there is a study that was shown in the most recent World Scouting Strategy Conference, is that in 10 years from now, we might have 19 different devices. We might be connected by 19 different devices. And that is very, it could be very daunting to consider when you have different ad formats, different platforms, Google, Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, instant messaging ads, and so on. So with that, it's important, again, not to spread yourself too thin, really focus on the high intent platforms, and also understand that it's always changing. So it's important to really learn from that environment and test and try new things. Yeah. So after the session, this was pretty much all that I put together. I'll be sharing with you guys the ads versus boosting guide, current state of nonprofit advertising, which might help, search ads formatting sheet, which will help you if you do dive into the search world. And then, of course, one of the latest TikTok report, which kind of gives you a view on how that platform is growing and what are some ad formats that you can utilize. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rana. That was really, really useful. I do not pretend to be a social media expert in the slightest. So these sorts of sessions are really informative for me. And I'm sure that everybody else found it, really great as well to listen to your expertise on this. Now, for those who are familiar with these sessions, this is now the time where we open up the floor to any questions that anyone might have. We'll give you a couple of minutes just to think about those. You can put your hand up so that we know that you have a question, or if you don't feel like speaking directly, you can always type it in the chat as well. I have a couple, but I'd be interested to know if anybody else would like to go before me. So I will wait for any questions to come through first. We have a question from Jean Roland. How is your French, Rana?
Unfortunately, I wish I had more. Not so great.
It's okay. Jean-Roland, do feel free to type it in.
Je peux?
Oui.
Bonjour, je peux?
Yes, please, go ahead. You can, Ko has just said you can speak in French, and then perhaps he can type the translation out for us.
Alors, bonjour tout le monde. Merci à Rihanna. J'espère que vous me recevez. Et moi, je voudrais demander, est-ce qu'il y a des techniques qui permettent de faire le lien entre les publicités et l'audience d'une page Facebook. C'est-à-dire que lorsque nous faisons une publicité, lorsque nous faisons du boosting, nous constatons que la publicité, la pub est bien suivie. Mais en retour, les gens, notre objectif aussi, c'est de faire en sorte que le nombre d'abonnés, le nombre de followers de la page augmente. Mais ce n'est pas toujours le cas. Est-ce qu'il y a une technique qui permet, à travers le boosting, d'augmenter l'audience d'une page? Et je voudrais aussi qu'elle nous parle aussi des, comment on appelle, des hashtags. Comment utiliser les hashtags, comment composer les hashtags. Merci.
Rana, did you get that? It was on the, co-messaged the group to say that you could switch to the English interpretation.
Sorry, I did not get that. Sorry, I didn't have my chat open.
Okay. Well, the first question was a bit of a long one. So perhaps I can ask Jean-Roland to repeat that one again. But the second one was, so there were two questions involved, and one was about boosting, how you can optimize boosting. And then the second one was on hashtags and how the best way to write those. But perhaps Jean-Roland, would you mind repeating your question in French, and then everyone can switch to the English so we get the full question.
OK, il n'y a pas de problème. Merci.
Maya, how are you switching? Because I'm not.
At the bottom, it's on interpretation, and it says listen in, and then you can switch to English.
Got it. Thank you.
D'accord. Donc, je demandais, pour la première question, je demandais comment faire en sorte que le boosting ou bien les publicités permettent également d'accroître ou bien d'augmenter le nombre de followers d'une page. Parce que parfois, lorsque nous faisons les publicités, nous constatons que ça prend. Ça dit que les gens voient, les gens suivent la pub, mais en retour, nous avons également pour objectif à ce que, à travers cette pub-là, le nombre d'abonnés de la page Facebook augmente. Or, ce n'est pas toujours le cas. Comment faire pour que la publicité ait un impact sur l'audience de la page? La deuxième question, je demandais à ce qu'elle nous parle un peu des hashtags. Comment composer les hashtags pour que ça ait d'impact? Merci.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. So if I go ahead and address your question, thank you so much for the question, Jean-Roland. So the first one, it's important to know that boosting is not the right format if you're looking for page likes, which are ultimately your followers. If you're boosting on Facebook, then you're either looking for engagement, you're looking for interaction, you're looking for to increase your reach of one post. If you want to grow your page likes for Facebook, then there is a page like ad. And you can find that in the ads manager. So that is specifically to get page likes. Now, I will caution against page likes because what typically happens is you'll pay and you will get a lot of page likes, but they might not be quality. So then let's say 6 months from now, you want to do a post for your page and it's an organic post, it's not an ad. Those followers that liked your page from that page like will not interact and might even end up unfollowing you. So Facebook specifically is moving away from page likes and from followers. You can see this in now posts on Instagram. If you look at a post, it no longer says, 500 people liked this post. So this is a slow evolution of going away with that because there has been challenges with this in the past. So the question, I guess, for also to look at in your case is how do you get more engagement? Because the more engagement you get on your page, the more people will come. And how do you create posts that are utility, so that are useful for someone to look at? So if they're getting a piece of information or an action that they can take, that's what I would advise again to do, as opposed to looking at just likes on Facebook or Instagram followers. For Instagram, there is no ad that gives you followers. Just that one needs to be very clear, because sometimes we end up spending money on these ads, but there's no objective on Facebook currently. There hasn't been in the past to get more Instagram followers. That's just not something that the platform caters for. To your second question on hashtags, it's a great question. So typically we would use hashtags that already have a lot of following to build, let's say, our engagement, and that's great. But one of the best practices that we advise brands is doing some research around what does your audience care about now, and create your own unique hashtag and always consistently use it in a campaign. So maybe your next post is about climate change. Maybe you've done some research around what your audience is looking for. So to try to own your own hashtag and consistently use it, that's important. That will help you grow. But if you're just looking to leverage existing hashtags, like very generic hashtags, then you could use, let's say, impact or climate change or human rights. Those hashtags already have a large following, and you'll be placed there. But one thing that I would caution against, platforms like TikTok, for example, the more hashtags you use, the less engagement you get. So you can see that these platforms operate differently. So it would be up to you on which platform do you consider using the hashtag. I hope that answered your question.
Oh, Ampar, go ahead. I see your hands raised.
Yeah. So I want to ask a question related to hashtags. So you say that the more hashtags you make in TikTok, the less conversion you got. So how many hashtags should we put in our post?
Okay, so if you're speaking for TikTok specifically, our recommendation is around 2, at best 3. And this is just because the algorithm works differently. It's not like Instagram where you put, let's say, 10 hashtags and you have potentially the ability to appear in those places when people are searching for that specific hashtag. TikTok operates on engagement. They're not really focusing on, let's say, followers, right? That's why when you get on someone's feed, you'll have one video that has 40,000 views, but maybe they have a following of like 10, for example. So because the algorithm focuses on engagement, the hashtag use, we typically recommend 2, at best 3, but really trying to own your own hashtag as well. That's also important because it adds to your branding element. So if it's a hashtag that you've created and that you are constantly promoting. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Does anybody have any other questions?
Yes,
Hi.
I have one another question. The point is that in Madagascar, we have our main channel on Facebook. We have a page on Facebook, but recently we created a TikTok account. So we need to increase the audience in TikTok. We try to create challenges, but for the moment there's no much success, because our strategy is to share our challenge on Facebook So I want to ask, is it the best way to increase our TikTok page, or is there more efficiency strategy about that?
Sure, that's a great question. Thank you for that. So with TikTok, they have other ads formats that you can use as well. But you mentioned that you're creating your own challenges and hoping that that brings the engagement and the followers. So with TikTok, one thing, because it's such a communal platform, it's solely based on interactivity. The best way to get more attention to your page and more attention to your post or your video in this case is to leverage on existing challenges. So if there's an existing challenge that's already gained the momentum online and it's trending within that specific window that you want to do your video, leverage on that, but make it so that it is unique to Scouts, right? So an example of this would have been, there are specific songs that are trending at the moment. And you can look at it in your For You page. You'll notice that you'll get served, let's say 3 or 5 videos with the same exact song. Utilize that same song, but make your video in your own way, your own style. So if you can leverage trending audio, trending challenges that are already prominent, you will be playing in a space that everyone is already attracted to at the time. So that's leveraging a trend. If you create your own unique challenge, unless you have ads or a marketing budget behind it, it's the likelihood of you not being seen is a lot higher, as opposed to leveraging on an existing challenge that is already prominent and is trending at the time in window in which you look to post.
Okay, thank you.
Let's see a question on the chat. Sure. This is great. I think this is one of the things that we've been speaking to Scouts about on diversifying.
Oh, sorry, Rana, would you mind just reading out the question so that Co can translate it?
Sure, sorry about that. So the question is from Olga, and we're trying to reach out to parents on Facebook. What's the best way to target ads to parents? In addition, on Facebook, we advertise our podcast for parents on how to support a child's upbringing. Do you have any advice on targeting a podcast ad for parents? Great. So I'll try to answer them in sections. So trying to reach out to parents, I think, is a great method to diversify your audience. We're such a large movement that, although primary core audience might be the youth, we still need to consider the influencing factor of the youth, which in most cases are the parents. So when you look at that targeting set, which asks you location, demographic, age group, interests, it's important to really set those out so that you are communicating specific common interests with parents as well. So perhaps education, being very targeted in those fields will help you reach the parents. You can even target based on income. You can target based on cities and location, as I mentioned. You can geofence so that you're only targeting to a specific area. So that's something that I would recommend. Really put as much detail in your targeting as you can and interests that are relatable to parents. If you're unaware of what those interests are, there's quite a bit of research on what are parents of today looking for. Those trends will also help, especially screen time. There's a really big study, which I can also share after this, around parents' concerns over screen time in the coming years. So that's a very unique and niche strategy, but you could essentially put up a campaign that talks about the benefits of the movement and also this concern that is very real and happening with parents at the moment. In terms of podcasts, I think podcasts are great. Great lo-fi way to really reach the audience. There are specific ads that you can do to potentially just, if the podcast is hosted on the website, then obviously you maybe want to drive traffic to it. You could do that. I'm not sure if it's hosted in an app. You can also do app traffic ads if that's something that you're looking to do. But essentially also keep it like a series, right? If you're considering the format, perhaps there's a snippet in that podcast that is really powerful. You might want to take that snippet and use that as your creative, which ultimately is now become an audio ad, right? Which is very, very useful. And of course, last but not least, platforms like Spotify allow you to do ads in their domain, which is great, especially since they are an audio platform. And so you could potentially have, your own ad for your podcast on Spotify, as opposed to Meta, for example, or as opposed to Google. Does that answer your questions? My pleasure.
I have a very basic question.
Sure.
I wanted to ask about tools. So you mentioned obviously audience segmentation being increasingly important and the use of AI tools. And I'm sure there are lots of different options for both of those. And I was wondering if you could recommend, from your experience, the best tools so we can break down and move away from this traditional way of targeting audiences to audience segmentation, and for AI tools, what are the most useful ones?
Sure. There are so many, and I feel like every other week there's something new, which is great. It's good to be, in a place where you get access to so many things. I guess I'll start first from the basic execution, right? Sometimes we're just daunted at the fact that creating an ad where it sounds so simple, but it might take 20 steps, from creating the asset, deciding what the communication is, what kind of format to use, and so on. On the platforms itself, there are ways in which you can use the Creative Studio from Meta, which help you do that. But you can also look at platforms like Copy.ai, which allows you to craft messaging, in an instant for a specific group of people by you just giving the information. That's also one way to look at it. In terms of tools for data segmentation, my company itself, we do have an audience segmentation that allows you to reclassify your audience. And that basically is looking at, what industry are you in, what market are you in, and giving you a pool of information about what is the behavior of your key audiences. And that might be one audience, or that might be 3. So that's something that you could potentially look at. But I know that IBM Watson has a few options for this as well. I know that there is an audience tool that is available, but these tend to be very costly. And they often offer, corporate licenses that are, extremely expensive, or require, a more substantial setup. But I think there are some other lower tier ones that are coming in that could be, one-off use that you could consider as well.
Thank you so much. Are there any other questions? So we had some people joining right towards the end. If you have a question, do feel free to put up your hand or ask straight out, or you can type it in the chat if you feel more comfortable doing that. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, and actually we're bang on time anyways, so that's pretty good timing. Well, I suppose all that's left to say is thank you so much, Ruana, for your time. I really appreciate this. Was a really, really useful presentation. I know you mentioned that you would be passing along some information, so please do, and then I can post that onto the group, both in Treehouse and on Facebook, and I'll put the recording up as well. So those who didn't have the opportunity to attend today can definitely watch the recording and get tons and tons of information from that.
Perfect, will do.
Okay. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate it.
Thank you,
And
everyone.
we'll see you next time.